Hello, welcome to the Law Professor channel. My name is Professor Oluwakemi Adekile, and in today's presentation we want to continue with the discussion on some introductory concepts to the Law of Tort. And in this presentation, therefore, we would examine the interests that are protected by the Law of Torts. Would look at the question of damage, okay, and the characteristics of tortious liability, as well as possibly examine some other aspects of the conceptual framework for tort law. The introductory aspect of the Law of Tort is very critical for an understanding of the subject. Tort is quite wide, and we've established the various formulations of the Law of Tort in terms of case law statutes. But you need a good understanding of these introductory aspects to be able to appreciate some of the discussions that would take place in the course of the course. As you proceed, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, to like the video, and to share with others who would need this kind of experience. So, what are the interests protected by the Law of Torts? Because a subject area does not exist in itself, it has a particular focus in terms of what that law is supposed to protect. Okay, and when you look at the Law of Tort, you can group the various interests into some categories. Some torts protect harm to a person. They prevent you from being physically injured. They protect a plaintiff or a claimant from the risk of personal injuries, including death. When it's personal injuries, including death. So some torts, for instance, a tort like assault and battery, and they protect in that respect. The tort of negligence, which is a very expansive tort that actually covers every form of interest, protect from injury to your person. And so where you have a scenario that talks about injury to the person, you will know the torts that you should focus on. And if a tort does not protect against personal injury, you will not look at that tort as a cause of action. Then you have harm to property. Tort law also protects your property from being injured, from third parties interfering with your property, your physical property, like land, for instance, your houses and what have you. So torts like trespass to land, although some of these torts are regarded as actionable per se, in the sense that you don't need to claim that something had actually happened to that item of property, but the idea is to protect. For instance, why should somebody invade your property, should come upon your assets or whatever without your permission? So of course, at a secondary level, they also protect against breach of the peace, because if you do not have something like trespass to land, that means that somebody can just walk upon your land or do something on your property, cut down your trees or do other things without your consent. And if you try to engage that person, it could result in a breach of the peace. So you have torts like that. You have nuisance. The tort of nuisance, which protects the interaction of neighbors, property owners. You must even actually be and have an interest in land in order to have a tort that the tort of nuisance. For instance, you look at the component of the tort of nuisance, you must have an interest in land when it comes to private nuisance. And one of the ways that you can commit a tort of nuisance is where there is physical damage to property or substantial interference with the use and enjoyment of land. So this is one of the ways that we ensure that properties are protected. You have the rule in Relevance and Fletcher, you have the tort of negligence. So torts therefore protect against harm to your property. Then sometimes some torts protect against financial or business interests, loss to your finances or business interests. Negligent misstatement could cause personal injury. It could also cause economic loss, financial loss. If you give somebody a financial advice, maybe an investment advice to purchase shares in a company, for instance, and then the advice which is given in a professional capacity and has made requirements for that in that respect, exposes that person to economic loss. You could have thoughts like passing off, where someone actually exploits your business reputation, what we call the goodwill, and takes advantage of it and makes economic profit, makes profit from it without any recourse to you. So these are thoughts that therefore assist a plaintiff in court to ensure that people do not harm their economic reputation or economic interest. And you have other thoughts in that respect. So essentially, therefore, we're saying that you can cause financial harm. The actions of the defendant may cause you financial loss, and so you have to look at the thoughts that protect against financial loss to situate your course of action. Reputation can be affected. Okay, tort law protects your reputation, the way people regard you. Your reputation is an asset that should not be, should not in any context be abused in any way. And then where someone causes you injury to your reputation, it's quite difficult to recover it, unlike physical property. So defamation is one tort, for instance, that does that protects people, people from having their reputation unduly interfered with. Then there can be an injury to where there is an infringement of due process of law, where people abuse the due process of law. When you have a tort like malicious prosecution, for instance, it's one way in which someone can exploit the legal process in a way that the law does not recognize, and so there are torts in that respect. Traditionally, tort law also protected family sanctity, marriage, and the family. You had torts like enticement, where somebody can be liable in tort for enticing the wife of another person. The tort that's gender based, because it was an action that a man could pursue against someone that interfered with his wife. Enticement, harboring, these are still torts in Nigeria, although they are no longer causes of action under the English common law. So these various interests that the law protects against, this represent the kind of damage that you could suffer in law for you to say you have a cause of action. If you don't have any kind of damage that the law recognizes, you will not be able to successfully sue in the law of tort. But once you can identify any of these interests that we have talked about as having been violated, then you will be working in the realm of what we call damage. There is damage. When you use the word damage in the law of tort, there is damage, that is injury, and damages, that is the financial compensation that the law would award. So when you see the word damage, that's not financial compensation, but when you see the word damages, that's financial compensation. So damage will arise because somebody has violated any of the interests that the law protects and recognizes as protectable by a tort. So that can be economic loss, personal injury, violation of personality rights, and what have you. The nature of tortious liability is such that there are some basic and general principles of law that we use to describe this liability. There's what we call damnus sine injuria, that is damage without legal injury. You have suffered the damage, a kind of damage that anybody can see. This thing has caused you this injury, but the law may say it is not an injury, a damage that it recognizes. Not every grievance or loss is actionable as a tort. Not everything that a person suffers in society is actionable as a tort. It may be actionable as any other thing, but it may not be a tort. But it must be that a duty that has been breached. You said tort is a breach of duty fixed by law. If there is no duty fixed by law with respect to the thing that has taken place between the plaintiff and the defendant, it will not constitute a tort. And so we can say that a legal injury a damage has taken place without a legal injury, an injury recognized by law. And in that respect, you come across the case of Bradford Corporation and people. That case illustrates to you clearly that somebody might have a complaint, maybe between neighbors, road users, anybody, but the law does not recognize your complaint as a breach of duty that it has fixed, because tort is about duties fixed by law. If you want to claim something in contract, you can go ahead and claim in contract, but definitely if it's not a duty that the law has recognized as having been fixed by it and infracted, you will not have a cause of action. Then you have injurious sine damno, where a legal injury has taken place even though there is no damage. For example, somebody walks upon your land just to cross to the other side of the road. The land has suffered no damage. Your flowers are not damaged. Nothing was done. You will not even notice. If not that you saw the person walking across, you will not even see the footprints of the person. But it is not permissible to walk across another person's property without their permission. It will be trespass. There is a legal injury even though there is no physical damage, no observable damage. Okay, so you have those components: the damno sine injuria, damage without legal injury, and then you have injurious sine damno, legal injury without damage. In that case, once a legal injury has occurred, whether there is a physical damage or not, there is liability. These are torts that we call torts that are actionable per se. Okay, torts that are actionable per se. Examples are the trespasses: trespass to persons, trespass to land, trespass to goods. So it is therefore important that you identify the nature of the injury, whether it's an injury that the law recognizes or it does not recognize, so that you do not waste the time of your client in bringing a case to court for which there is no legal remedy. I will conclude this video by looking very briefly at what we call mental elements in torts. When you begin to discuss the substantive torts, you must always watch out for the state of mind with which the cause of action arose, because sometimes, and in fact in most cases, it is significant to determine whether that particular tort occurred. If the tort of negligence demands that you act in a way that a reasonable man would not act, it is a negligent state of mind with which you are required to act. Okay, so that is not strict liability. So you need to take note of how the tort is defined to identify the state of mind with which the tort should be committed. Sometimes they talk about intentionally doing something intentionally. So is it intentional? That is, in this respect, the person was quite conscious of what they are doing, and they desire to produce the results, the consequences that they actually produce. If a thought is in that realm, then you say that there is intentional action. Of course, the intention, to define intention is not just something you can define in a statement or two. You need to look at the core meaning of what you mean by intention. It's there to produce a particular result. Okay, and sometimes a thought must be committed negligently, that is carelessness or indifference as to whether the injury or the consequences are produced. The law says you ought to have seen it. A reasonable person would have seen it, and if you don't see it, then you have committed a tort. Sometimes we describe some torts with what we call strict liability, in the sense that the law is not even interested with whether you are at fault or not, whether it was not my fault, I didn't do it intentionally. Those statements will not matter with respect to a cause of action that is based on strict liability. For instance, the rule in Riders and Fletcher, liability for for dangerous animals, liability for fire. These are thoughts that I didn't intend to cause a fire, will not hold a defense. Finally, with regards to the mental element, therefore, you can also have what we call malice. When the law says you've acted with malice, which sometimes malice is regarded in some thoughts as spite, wickedness, ill will. It's there to harm somebody, or sometimes it is regarded in law to import a wrongful motive. It may not be spite in that respect, it may not be wickedness, but the motive is improper. It's not a motive that law recognizes as legitimate motive. Then that is regarded as malice. For instance, when you look at malicious prosecution as a tort, you will watch out for the kind of malice that we are talking about. Or when you do something that is wrong, conscious that you are doing it with intentionality, the law may sometimes regard that as malicious too. because of the fact that you are cognizant of the consequences of what you are doing. So when you look at this, look at Wilkinson and Danton, for instance, Jambia and Sweeney. When you look at the thoughts in this respect, there is part a thought called the thought of in Wilkinson and Danton, where somebody played a practical joke and on another person, and it caused injury. So it's said to have caused, you didn't intend to cause the injury, but you did the act or that you did with intentionality. Okay. So despite this, then you talk about motive, the motive for doing something. Motive is generally the reason for doing something. So sometimes you'll be talking about motive, sometimes you'll be talking about malice, that's the basis of acting. Tort law is generally not concerned with motive. It's generally, as a general rule. So if you do a lawful act, you have the right to do it, but you did it with bad motive. It does not render it to be a tort. On a general plane, there are some distinctions that we bring out in the course of the various discussions. Okay, so when you're legally entitled to something and you do not do it, you do it with a bad motive, it does not necessarily render it malicious, tortious, so to say. But in some cases, to this, there are exceptions to this rule. And you can see the case of Bradford Corporations and Pickles and Gaba and Lagos City Council for the various dimensions in which motive can arise. So these are some of the issues that I want us to take note as important for a proper understanding of the subject of tort before you even go to the substantive tort. I'll see you at the next presentation. Don't forget once again to subscribe to the channel, to like the video, and to share it with your friends.